So Deldot has their sort of what the more zealous of them refer to almost as their Bible. In the Deldot folder, J forms agencies, Deldot 2 entrance and subdivision regulations. There's a book called the DCM, or the Development Coordination Manual. And this, the most useful chapters in the DCM are probably chapters 3, 4, and maybe 5. Many of the others aren't that useful. So if you're wanting to just kind of dig into how they think, this is the manual to get more familiar with. I brought this up at the moment because chapter 3 on record plan design, page 3-17, has this figure 3.4.2.b requirements for adjacent existing features on record plans. The most important things really are adjacent entrances. If Scott has not field located these, we can rely on satellite imagery to trace in the locations of these entrances, and it's based on speed limit as far as how far within your entrance that you'll need to show these things. So you're also going to trace some pavement beyond our frontage for things like the site distance triangle. So this is where you'll go into our topo file. Now, anything you digitize, when you add it to our topo file, you duplicate the existing layers. So if you have EXEOP, you're going to make that layer current, create a brand new layer. Because that layer is current, it will make your new layer have the same color and line type, and change the layer name to D-EOP. And D just means it's digitized. It means it wasn't field located, but we digitized it from a source that we hope is reasonably accurate. And then the satellite imagery has held up pretty well as long as they're properly aligned. That's very likely to already be in your topo file before you've gotten started. So this is how far out those entrances are going to need to be shown. So I'm going to pull the DCM out of our shared page. And in this case, we mentioned that the things they're asking for are shown on sheets 2 and 3. So I think on this plan, we actually show more of the entrances that are further away on sheet, the site distance triangle. In terms of what's far away, so the distance in either direction, it exceeds what is required on that distance table. I don't believe we located the road all the way down here nor down there. We didn't locate all this. These are largely tracings. Right up against the right-of-way, we have a couple shots defining the driveway for, I think, all these driveways. If we're doing construction real near a driveway, as we dive in deeper, if we need more field data, we should get that on the survey schedule. But for things like site distance triangles, the accuracy presented on a satellite image really is sufficient. Okay, the next thing they're asking for is proposed land uses adjacent to and opposite the site. So we will usually add to the data that shows up on the survey. We'll usually have the adjoiners called out with a tax map ID number and who the land belongs to. We will look at the satellite images or do a field visit to determine, what is actually out there. This one's pretty easy. Other than a couple of vacant lands, you've got single family residential, and over here you have a mobile home park. So we're going to add that piece of information to the information tagging each residential or each adjacent property. If you're not sure about the land use, ask me. I may have some insight, or ask Scott. Final option is to do a site visit just to make sure, but generally you're going to be able to tell. There are cases where we have added the zoning to the adjacent parcels, particularly when we're doing a rezoning ourselves. But that's not something that's necessarily called out and required for, so we don't always do that. If there are shoulders, sidewalks, shared use pathways, existing right-of-way easements and reservations, drainage features including inlets and pipes on our entrances. So we have this drainage pipe here on our entrance, of course, is going to be ripped out. These entrances actually did not have drainage pipes under them. None of them did. Drainage on this road, quite frankly, sucks. I drove it during a rainstorm and it was pretty bad. But if those pipes are there, again, if it's beyond our frontage, if it's beyond the extent of our improvements, I don't necessarily feel a huge need to get it showing up on this plan. But if we're doing improvements down that way, if we're doing pavement overlays, we want to know where those culverts are because they are likely to need to get ripped out and reset if we're widening adding a shoulder and things of that nature. Transit facilities, including public transit and school bus stops. Not a lot of bus stops in Sussex County, but occasionally you have them. Basically where a sidewalk ties into a road with a wider piece of concrete than normal is typically all you see in a bus stop. And then buildings and other structures. I don't always trace every house. We did not do that here. They have already commented on this plan once. They didn't ask for it. How relevant that is, if they're really near the right of way, I'm a little more inclined to trace them from the satellite imagery. When we did Nassau Road Hilltop Apartments, I think we traced the commercial buildings on the next property up. They're very close to the right of way. It's pretty relevant. It has some bearing. This is a string of houses here. It's across from a private road. I'm not going to show them unless they insist, and if they insist, I'm going to ask them why. Proposed features, proposed land uses. Again, I mean, that's spelled out on our cover sheet. Proposed entrance locations, that shows up on essentially every sheet. I mean, right-of-way easement or dedication reservation. That should show up on quite a few sheets. So 15-foot permanent easement is called out. The 5-foot right-of-way dedication is called out. That information should certainly appear. On this one, we kind of have our existing conditions. The last thing they asked for, which we'll get to later, is a preliminary entrance plan, which we're essentially making like a striping plan. But that should show the dedication. This here certainly has to show the dedication because when this gets recorded, in the state's opinion, they then have title to that dedicated area and they have that permanent easement recorded because it shows up on the plat. There are attorneys that would argue, and maybe even successfully, that without a deed, you don't have anything. And that is my appointment. So I'm going to wrap this up here.